When I was in college a couple of years ago, maybe a few more than a couple, but I was walking through the lobby of a dorm, and there was a soap opera on. I don't know which one it was, with a bunch of students watching it. And one of them, as I remember, just burst out at something that had happened on that soap opera, saying, "It's about time they divorced him." Just gleefully that it was time. Well, there's some improper rejoicing going on. And that by a lot of so-called Christians. And so I thought this would be a great subject to deal with, improper rejoicing, from Hosea 9 and verse 1. Brother Johnny Oxendine is going to be speaking on it. He and his wife Pamela have 2 children. He works with the congregation in San Mateo, California. Our members will make a better connection knowing that he is Noah Hackworth's son-in-law. Noah spoke on this lectureship many times, so there is that connection there. He has done mission work in England and speaks on several lectureships every year. So we're glad that he is here and has taken his time to come and going to speak on this subject of improper rejoicing.
When you first started out, I wasn't sure where Gary was. I mean, not Gary, but Michael. I wasn't sure where Michael was going with that. I was thinking about Bruce. Bruce said, well, it might not be a bad idea if you go ahead and have like a little podcast, have your tape recorder, and all of you can have your tape recorders, and we can all just sleep through this. I know how you feel. If you don't think I know how you feel, because the ladies did such a great job, as they always have, and in San Mateo they do a great job, and then we come in and we have our afternoon worship at about 2 o'clock. And of course, so if you start to sleep, I'm not offended. I've seen it before. Many times, and we have a young man in the congregation there. We usually have to have someone go sit next to him and wake him, and it got so bad that it was really noticeably loud snoring, and we told him even in the men's meetings that you're snoring, you're just distracting people, and we're going to have people go and punch you and push you and nudge you and shake you and wake you up, and don't get mad, because that's what's going to happen. But so this time of the afternoon, I know how after a good meal the body starts to sort of droop, and so I'm not even worried about that. We do want to mention that Brother Hatcher is going to be coming out to San Mateo to speak in November. A number of you have come out there to speak from time to time, and we get a chance to show you that with all the other things that we sometimes mention about California, that if you come out there, you'll see it's really a beautiful place. It's really beautiful, and from time to time we'll be inviting a number of you. I want to thank Brother Gary also for his mention of all these literary figures, Melville, Shakespeare. I thought he was going to Dante and Proust next. I just wasn't sure what that was going to be about. And Brother Ruffin, I appreciate when he was talking about how long will God put up with this. And I thought about that because that's part of the lesson also in Hosea chapter 9, the idea of improper rejoicing. But how long is God going to put up with the way that people act? And of course we know that in Hosea 4 and 6 it says people are destroyed from lack of knowledge, and we look at this generation and how similar it seems to be in many ways, and especially think about the examples that were given in Richland Hills and many other places that I think were mentioned in Massachusetts. I know in New York, congregation or well, in New York. I wouldn't call it a congregation. In New York there, Manhattan, what used to be the Church of Christ, they have women who are serving, saying the prayers, just about everything else. Also, not far from where we are, in Palo Alto, very similar situation. They don't call them elders, they call them spiritual leaders. They have 2 women spiritual leaders, a couple women deacons. It's a mess. My topic, improper rejoicing. And if you want to see some improper rejoicing, just turn on the news around the end of this month, because this is about the time of the parade that they have out in San Francisco. Of course, you know the issues that we've been dealing with. I think that California has thrown all of you for a loop, because almost all of these homosexual marriage states are in the Northeast, or running through some of the middle states. But in California, fortunately, we've had the voters who have voted that down twice in the last 8 years, and fortunately, the court upheld it for at least a part of it. And so I know none of you thought that was going to happen. Improper rejoicing. We had a person announce that one of the reasons that their child wasn't able to be at Bible class was because they were in training to be a lifeguard. Improper rejoicing. We think about the instances of also in the Bible. Think about Jacob being called back to Bethel. Genesis 35. And in verse 2, there's the implication there that there's probably some improper rejoicing going on. He needs to be back where he had made his vow. We can think about the man who had decided that he was very satisfied with what he had accomplished in his life, and he was going to build some bigger and better barns. We can think about the Philistines just prior to Samson bringing down the house. Improper rejoicing. We can remember the messages that Moses gave the people, the books of Deuteronomy, when he told them how they were going to act when they got over into the promised land. That they would forget God, that they would become worldly people. The word improper itself, though not part of the text, not suited to the circumstances, not consistent with established truth, not conforming, one definition in the American Heritage Dictionary, not conforming to moral law, not appropriate. Before I go any further, I want to thank the congregation here, the leadership and all, for providing me with this opportunity to speak. I told Bruce, I said, this is the lullaby time. I said, you really ought to think about how to do this in your own congregations when you want to bring someone to teach false doctrine. You know, it's about 1:30, 2 o'clock. Everybody's all sort of ready to nod off, and the thing is you start talking in a very low voice, and everybody starts nodding like because they're in agreement now with everything that you say. So it's really not that hard to do. But in Hosea chapter 9 and verse 1, God says, "Do not rejoice, O Israel, with joy like other peoples, for you have played the harlot against your God. You have made love for hire on every threshing floor." We would, as we read this, we would ask a question, or at least the question should come up immediately. Why would God not want his people to rejoice? The scriptures have encouraged this type of expression on numerous occasions. Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 12, verse 12, chapter 12, verse 18. Of course, we see immediately in the text, we see the reason for this, because they have played the harlot. And we want to look at this afternoon. We want to talk about it a little bit, ascertain why this command was given, what particular purpose that it must be for Israel. And I think that it accurately reflects the truth too often neglected. And even though God continue, as we look at this text, even though and here in other parts of Hosea that have been discussed earlier and will be discussed later, even though God continued to love his people, the words that we used in the book and the text at the end of the chapter, we use that at the beginning of the chapter in the book. Hosea chapter 14, verse 9. And we see two very definite polarities taking place there. That the just shall follow God, and they will be rewarded. But it also says that the transgressors will fall. And obviously, not only as we look at it in the context here, the people of God then and now cannot possibly, and this extends beyond this particular text to many other things, that people cannot assume that God will somehow indiscriminately permit a transgression of his will and at the same time be in fellowship with him simultaneously. That's not going to happen. Over in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 52. And there we see another warning against the false security that Israel presumes that it has. Improper rejoicing presumes that there is a certain degree of security. And they shall besiege thee in all thy gates. Thy high and fortified walls come down, wherein thou trusted. Is it time? I knew that was a long opening, but I haven't even gotten around to talking about Dove. As has already been stated, the name Hosea means salvation, and the time of the book has already been given about 775 BC, between that time and 725 BC. And certainly we see the revolving themes that are stated there, and not just here, but throughout the text of the Bible. God despises sin. Now there is no other way to look at anything in the Bible except from that perspective. God despises sin. He does not compromise with it. He does not accept it. He does not whitewash it or water it down. He does not, on any set of terms, accept it. He will bring his wrath upon the disobedient. And he will provide an offer of redemption when repentance takes place. Now, as we go through the minor prophets, and we have seen these men, and one of the things I really have enjoyed about listening to the other speakers in this series, is that these men, these prophets, so-called minor prophets, spoke with a ferocity, a fierceness, a courage, and a boldness that has already been intimated that we should have more of today. We should be able to look at these men as examples because their circumstance, their situation is not that different from ours. And they are crying out to their people to repent. And I think that it's what's needed in the world today. There are too many people like Joel Osteen and others who, I can't even talk about those people, but you know what I'm talking about. That's not even the Bible. And Israel is described throughout this book as an unfaithful wife, just as Gomer was unfaithful to her husband. And the imagery here is powerful imagery. When we look at the story in this particular book, and the unique way that the Lord delivers the message to his people using the prophet in his public life. And a lot of times we read the scriptures and we can see the story and we view it in sometimes a detached way. But if we become that particular person and identify not only with the message, but the means in which the message is transmitted. Because here we see the overwhelming love of God for his own people, and you cannot overemphasize that. And then we see Hosea's suffering throughout this magnificent book as we look at his experiences, as we look at this whole set of circumstances nearly unimaginable to us, and the testimony to his obedience. his perseverance, his monumental faith in God. And the idea God had here for him to recover Israel, the way that Hosea to recover his wife. And if God asked us to do that, just think about if God asked one of us to do that. He says, go on out there and find yourself, everyone here is old enough, go out there and find yourself a harlot. Make her your wife. Even today, that's hard to think about when you look at these women in the world today and the way that they traipse around and they are just trashy in the world today. Well, I should say trashy in the world 50 years ago is in style today. You see Britney Spears and all these other women in the way they dress, high school girls, the way they dress, junior high school girls, the way they dress. And so here we find this firm command from God, do not rejoice like the other people. And he elaborates on why this particular command is given. And we look at what we need to take from this as the application today. Why was Israel rejoicing? Again, we talk about improper rejoicing in some instances, some examples of the way people rejoice today improperly. Again, we mentioned at the end of this month, not just in the Bay Area, probably some of the areas where you live, you'll have these parades and people, in San Francisco it's probably more extravagant, people dressed up and not dressed in so many weird and odd ways. And they'll be cheering in the streets. And people, one of the people in San Francisco, a writer for the newspaper, said, "Don't worry because that victory is already won." It said because the people who are voting against homosexual marriage and things like that, you are older people. Those who are coming up, the younger people, those are the ones that we're reaching out to. Those are the ones who will be voting for this in the future. Those who are 16 years old, we'll get them so that when they get to vote. See, this is, as you know, this is something that's not going to end. Why was Israel rejoicing? All of a sudden, Hosea just appears when they are preparing to hold this joyous festival. Word rejoice. I was looking that up in the lexicons. It says when one decides to give oneself over entirely, the entire disposition to a celebration, requiring the whole heart and mind. You think about God's people as they now see themselves, not dependent upon God. Now we know that there are a number of occasions in the scriptures where rejoicing is encouraged. Rejoice in the Lord, always. You can rejoice with God. You can rejoice apart from God. You can rejoice against God. The rejoicing that's taking place here as Israel, because of their recent and plentiful harvest, parading themselves around in this sort of celebration, this mood on their threshing floors, like the nations. In other words, like other worldly people. Someone asked, I think it was Brother Ruffner, it says you can't even tell, in some instances, you can't even tell a Christian from a worldly person. And I can't remember, I think it was on a number of occasions, I know it was over at Spring where Brother Lynn Parker came in and he made a good exhibit of modesty. And you may, if you've seen that, if you haven't seen that DVD, get that DVD for that reason only. And he was talking about how someone had called their building, another church had called their building and said, well, we're coming over to the water park. And we came last year or a couple years ago, something I can't remember exactly. And Brother Lynn said, "No, you didn't call here." He said, "Oh yeah, we did." He says, "No, you didn't, because nobody here would tell you that was all right." Lynn says, they said, "Okay, click." So we know even in the brotherhood, people don't have a clear understanding of what modesty is, and we find ourselves in too many instances with this improper rejoicing in just that way. Israel rejoicing because they have become just like the nations. They are celebrating because they have prostituted themselves. They have played the harlot just like, and we'll get to that point, but this is what makes them excited now. Worshiping God does not excite them anymore. Does not regenerate them anymore. Does not give them the exhilaration anymore. And this is what we're finding with young people. What do they want to look like? The people they see on TV, the people they see in the movie. Now, remind ourselves, if they're seeing those people on TV and in the movies, it's our fault. They're just like the Edomites, mentioned in the lesson on Obadiah. They feel now that they've reached a place of security. They can't be touched. They're God's people. He's not going to really do anything about it. He's not going to do anything to them. These prophets keep talking about this going into captivity. These prophets keep talking about repentance. These prophets keep talking to us about these things, and yet nothing's happened yet. So they have this assumed self-sufficiency. They're feeling comfortable. They're feeling complacent. We recall when they called for a king so that they could be like the nations. I think we all have to constantly watch out for that, fight against that, resist that. You don't want to be like the people in the world so much, and that's in your general appearance. Now, of course, nobody looks like Doug, but now here we see God's people involved in these pagan practices. They have already forgotten their God. They are trying themselves to build these palaces. They're not quite as lavish and luxurious and rich as the Assyrians. And they're devoid of any proper spiritual direction. That's intentional. People have to intentionally put God out of their minds. And they're attributing everything that they have, they're attributing the harvest, the prosperity that they have to false gods. And sometimes even today people think that they have what they have because of their own doing. They don't think that I'm able to do this, I'm able to accomplish this, I'm able to have this because God has blessed me with it. And they think, oh, I did this on my own. I thought this through. I made this plan. I've been able to execute on this. These people trusted in Baal. Trusting these false gods for their blessing of crops. Trusting in false gods to make them prosperous. And as a result, they stood before God as literal and figurative prostitutes. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 18. Thou shalt not bring the hire of a harlot or the wages of a dog into the house of Jehovah thy God for any vow. Or even both these are an abomination unto Jehovah thy God. Brings up a question of whether we envy the prosperity of the wicked. Whether that's a challenge in our congregations and in the various places that are represented here. Whether we have people who are trying to serve two masters. Whether they can have God and mammon. And I don't doubt but that all of the preachers here and those who are elders have had to work on those issues in our local congregations. People who want to have it both ways. People who want to have a little bit of the world and a little bit of God. The Lord said you can't have it that way. He says, I either have to be first or I'm last. And here we see that they had put their trust in Baal. Improper rejoicing. They don't understand that there really aren't any benefits to being unfaithful. I think that's one of the harder things for people to understand, this delusional idea about the benefits of being unfaithful. And I have mentioned many times a button that I saw in New York. I know I mentioned it in spring. I love to bring it up because I think it so aptly represents the way people think. And we were walking down I think maybe it was Madison, I don't remember the street, it doesn't matter, but I saw this big button. Big red button, red, you can see it clearly, and the sign, and it said, how much sin can I get away with and still go to heaven? And now, that's how people think. If you really want to know, that is how people think. And we look here, it's not only God's warning to his people about the false sense of security, but also a strong communication to all on the delusional benefits of unfaithfulness. The idea of having a little bit, this sometimes feeling that these perceived blessings. We talk to brethren about that in San Mateo. I'm sure you talk with them about it everywhere. In your home congregation, that person comes to you and says, I have this job, I have this new opportunity, I have this promotion. That sounds very good, brother. What is it? Well, I'm not going to be able to be there on Sunday mornings anymore. And I probably won't be able to be there on Wednesday nights. Well, that sounds like a demotion to me. He said, well, I'm going to be able to make so much more money, I'll be able to put in more contribution. See, that's the way they're viewing it. And sometimes they want you to go along with it. And we start thinking, well, let's see. We don't use that brother to sing songs or say prayers, and we're going to have a little bit more contribution. Sounds fine. He's just so happy to have a new job. He's not considering what it's going to be lost. Gain the whole world to lose his soul. But he's so happy. I think I mentioned before, these stories, they hit me all the time about this brother who was in Las Vegas. And in Las Vegas, he had these brethren, and he said, brethren, I need you to pray for me. And they said, why? I need you to pray that I don't lose my job. And they said, well, where do you work? I work in the casino. So these are the things that we see. This is a hard lesson here. It's a hard lesson for Israel, and they seem unable to learn these things. God has, throughout the book of Hosea, throughout some of the other messages that we have from the prophets, has constantly, over and over, Brother Ruffman put this out, over and over had to talk to them about repentance. Over and over talking to them about separating themselves. And they're so thrilled, they're so ecstatic over what they now have, and they haven't realized what they've lost. It's a lack of gratitude for God's overabundant and allowed blessings. In Hosea chapter 2, verses 7 through 10. And this chapter almost mirrors chapter 9 in some ways. She shall follow after her lovers, but she shall not overtake them. She shall seek them, but shall not find them. Then she shall say, I will go and return to my first husband. For then was it better with me than now. For she did not know that I gave her the grain and the new wine and the oil, and multiplied unto her silver and gold, which they used for Baal. Therefore will I take back my grain in the time thereof, my new wine in the season thereof, and will pluck away my wool, my flax, which have covered her nakedness. Now will I uncover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and none shall deliver her out of my hand. She was playing the harlot. Yeah. Israel would eventually come to see that there is no real satisfaction to be gained in harlotry. There is nothing really to be counted on there. This promiscuity with sin. Again, you remember Brother Lynn when he was making the examples and he brought out this little two-piece green thing. And what he, of course that was a great visual, but it was his reading the advertisements. It's not as though these companies don't know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing, and marketing companies know exactly what they're doing. I mean, for years, and this is just a statement, for years, they knew that tobacco caused cancer. And yet it was promoted, it was patriotic. If you lived in North Carolina, you had better smoke cigarettes. All the towns are named after cigarettes. Winston-Salem. And so when people are marketing things to you, and here with children and with their, oh, you'll look just sexy. And that's the word. You know, everything on TV, sex. Everything in the movies. You'll look more, you know, you'll be buffed, you'll have abs, all these things that, believe me, you'll never get. But the appeal is there. And it says that phrase, playing the harlot, in all of the different translations of the American Standard, the English Standard, going a whoring, playing the whore, all of these. They give the same basic definition for the word: to commit fornication, to commit harlotry, and to be unfaithful in relation to God. This society that we live in. And we look back at these people and we can point out their errors and we can say, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Why couldn't they see this? And we are sitting right on the same powder keg. And we're wondering, why can't we see this? I don't remember who, but the lesson was, by the time she's 18, and then you hope she marries someone in the church. What will be in the next generation? That depends on us. We look here, we think of Hosea, we think of the prophet, we think of his wife and the marriage that he has to Gomer, and this reflects in a way that this is a contemporaneous analogy to the already existent relationship that God had with Israel. He says, I want the people to see through you what their relationship is to me. And they probably were missing that. They probably were just saying, oh, poor Hosea there. Look at him, how his wife treats him. Not even getting the clue that that's how they were treating God. They weren't even thinking about it that way. And he, like all the prophets, trying to live a wholesome life. And wholesomeness in the world today is criticized. If you don't use certain words, if you don't dress certain ways, if you don't watch certain things, and people think you're the odd one. Over in Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 32 through 41. A wife that committeth adultery, that taketh strangers instead of her husband. They give gifts to all harlots, but thou givest thy gifts to all thy lovers, and bribest them, that they may come unto thee on every side of the whore. See, Israel thought that her lovers would be her friends. People and we hope that people in the church today can see clear of that, to understand that the people that they sometimes associate with, people that we sometimes allow to influence us, to infiltrate our consciousness in certain ways, they do not care about our souls. Oh, I thought he's... Well, I am used to getting, there's a fellow in San Mateo, he sits in the back, and when he says amen, it almost blows me all the way off. He's really got a strong voice. But here, because thy filthiness was poured out, and thy nakedness uncovered through the whoredoms with thy lovers. I will gather all thy lovers with whom thou hast taken pleasure, and all them that thou hast loved, with all them that thou hast hated, and I will even gather them against thee on every side. See, they didn't recognize what was really happening. But God has never taken unfaithfulness lightly. Not spiritually, and certainly we see it with regard to the marriage vows themselves. Someone was speaking about this also recently. And here, you think of Matthew 19, you think of Matthew 5, you think of, in the Old Testament, the idea of God hating divorce, or the fact of God hating, not the idea. Correction, the fact. And as he established marriage between a man and a woman, this is to heighten our awareness of fidelity in physical and certainly spiritual matters. He wants us to understand that. James, ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship of the world is enmity with God? That's a time-honored truth. It's the hardest thing for God's people to learn, then and now. And over in, well, he compares Israel's love to the morning mist, to an early dew which will disappear quickly. That fame of faithfulness, higher upon the grain floor. My question was, what causes a person to depart from the Lord and all of his bountiful blessings? What causes people to do that? We know that, as the Lord says, no one can pluck us out of his hands. We know that no matter what temptations come before us, that he provides a way of escape. So we know that God loves us, cares about us, protects us, gives us every possible resource to stay faithful to him. Why then don't we? We look at Israel here, and it's because they simply are worldly. What shall a man be profited if he gains the whole world? And that's what Israel was looking at. What do I gain if I depart from the Lord? What will be that temporary? What will be that more immediate gratification? I think that's what we see here. Eve, she accepted Satan's lie as a truth that she could believe and live with. She laid the groundwork for every sin that followed. And asked the question, what was it that Satan could offer her? He knew he couldn't offer her anything but death. The word hire, it means the wages or reward for the prostitute. That's what it means. Charge them that are rich in this present world that they be not high-minded, nor have their hope set on the uncertainty of riches. And his words are meant to sting. He's not trying to make it easy for Israel. He doesn't want them to feel, oh, that wasn't so bad. He's not going to pull a Joel Osteen on them. well, brethren, it's all right. You just go ahead and play the harlot for a while. It'll be all right. Nobody's going to be hurt. Nobody minds. He's not going to pull one of those. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I don't want to bring you down. No negative stuff. I appreciate Brother Hatch. Not Brother Hatch. I keep his names. I see these faces. Where is Terry? Anyway, Terry. I love Terry's lesson on that as he thought about it. They don't mind that these people, and bringing it to the present day, I want to talk about this just briefly before I go. I'm just going to read these little passages here, but I'll just bring it in right here. Today we have a situation in the brotherhood where there is improper rejoicing too, on doctrinal matters. And people feel a little comfortable, a little self-sufficient with their positions that are not in concert with God. And they feel pretty good about themselves because they've amassed quite a quote-unquote majority. And they have the powers that be behind them. And you have many brethren, if they just see certain names and institutions and publications, then they feel that that's the way they can go. And those who are sort of gluttonous on this is their improper rejoicing as well. They have prostituted themselves to false doctrine. They have put themselves higher on the corn threshing floors on that respect. And I think that unfortunately we will see an end to this lesson.